Hello, good evening, councillors. Good evening to everyone listening at home. This evening we have with us at the table here Richard Parker Harding, who is Head of Environmental Services, Robert Cowan, our legal advisor, and on my left, Louise Hollingsworth, who is our committee clerk from Democratic Services. The first item on the agenda is to authorise the minutes. To authorise the Chair to sign the minutes of the meetings of the Licensing and General Purposes Committee held on the 20th of May 2024 and the 22nd of May 2024. That's two separate meetings as correct records of the proceedings. I don't think I need to take them separately. All those in favour of accepting the minutes? Yes, that's carried. And I will therefore sign. Thank you, Louise. Agenda item number 2, apologies and substitutes.
We have apologies from Councillors Kirby Green and Tempe, and Councillor Biggs is present as substitute for Councillor Kirby Green.
Thank you, Louise. Are there any additional agenda items?
No, there are none, Chair.
Agenda item number 4, disclosure of interests and dispensations. To receive any disclosures by members of disclosable pecuniary interests or other registrable interests or non-registrable interests in any matters on the agenda and the nature of any interest and details of any dispensations obtained. Members are reminded of the need to repeat their declaration immediately prior to the commencement of the item in question. Are there any declarations of interest? There is none. Which brings us on to agenda item number 5, Taxi Licensing Policy 2024, and I hand over to Richard Parker Harding.
Thank you, Chair. This report seeks to approve an amended taxi licensing policy, the Taxi Licensing Policy 2024. Over the last 18 months, members have approved a number of changes to our taxi licensing policy. These include mandatory CCTV, mandatory training in customer care, disability awareness and safeguarding, permitting wheelchair-accessible vehicles, electric and pure hybrid vehicles to be licensed for 15 years, permitting tinted rear passenger windows which have a minimum light transmission of 30%, and only requiring annual VCTs for vehicles less than 10 years old. All these changes are highlighted in yellow in the appendix. The only other matter really to advise members of is in the policy, which I say is really consolidating the changes that members have already agreed. But in the policy, we've had to extensively rewrite Appendix E, which deals with CCTV conditions. In the past, we have allowed CCTV to be in vehicles if they comply with conditions. But now, because we're now moving to making it mandatory for licensed vehicles to have internal-facing CCTV, Appendix C has had to be rewritten. When it becomes mandatory, it means that the council becomes the data controller. So the company which installs the CCTV in the vehicle will be the data processor, and we will have an agreement between the council and that company to allow data to be shared between the processing company and ourselves. I think what's important to remember about internal-facing CCTV is that when it is mandatory, the images and any audio recording will not be available to anyone unless there's a complaint. Only if there's a complaint will then the council ask to see the CCTV images. The drivers themselves can't see the images. It's only when the council authorises the images to be viewed. Also, if we have a complaint from a passenger or against a driver, or if a driver is assaulted and we need information to give to the police, that's when the CCTV images will be available. But until then, they're going to be secure. The only other change which we're proposing in terms of CCTV is that we're looking at having audio as an option, but it would only be an option when it's switched on. So the driver or the passenger can switch on the audio function for a period of time. Again, the only exception to that is obviously with vehicles which are used in the school contract for transporting children to school. Actually, we're going to defer that decision about whether the audio should be on all the time to East Sussex County Council, as they're the ones that hold the contract. I think the idea is that if you have children being transported, it's not really fair to expect a child to turn on or not turn on the audio. So maybe the East Sussex County Council, as the transport provider, may decide to have the audio on all the time. This is a safeguarding issue. This is to safeguard the passenger and also protects the drivers against allegations. That's my introduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. And I think if we approve this, it has to go to full council.
Yes.
So comments can be taken on board. Councillor Field.
Sorry, Chair, I should have declared a personal interest as a member of East Sussex County Council.
Thank you, duly noted. Yes, Councillor Delaney.
I just wanted to ask, if the drivers aren't able to see the footage, how will they know that it's working if there was an issue subsequently?
Well, my understanding is that when there's a hard disk in the vehicle which is recording all the time, the driver will be able to see that that's working because they're on the visual monitor. The monitor is tell the driver that this is recording, and there will be an annual check to make sure it is properly recording. It's a hard disk, so it will rewrite after 28 to 31 days, depending on the system.
Thank you. Councillor Biggs.
Yeah, just a couple of questions. The knowledge and literacy test, is that conducted in-house or is that outside?
The literacy, the English proficiency test, we use a private company called Verdant, who conduct the test. We didn't do it. We haven't done it in-house because they're the experts in English proficiency, and also removes any bias from officers. And the knowledge test is something which is locally based, so it's done. We've brought the software, but we have loaded the questions ourselves, and we can change the questions at any time. So there's a series of questions, and then they're not. There's a series of 100 questions, but then they appear randomly for each individual driver.
And just one other question. Everything that's highlighted in yellow, the training and the CCTV, do you carry out spot checks?
In terms of the training, obviously we won't issue the licence unless we've received confirmation that the got certificate in to say the training's been carried out. With the CCTV, we do carry out sort of random checks on vehicles. And any time that a vehicle comes in to be inspected, then the CCTV will run the checks. And also past the VCT, it'll be a check on the CCTV that's actually working. And in addition to that, there'll be an annual check by the processing company. At the moment, we've identified 2 companies who can provide the CCTV equipment. Hopefully, we'll be able to identify more. But obviously, we can only use those companies which will sign an agreement with ourselves, a sharing agreement with ourselves. So that at the moment, not any driver can't go to any company. They can only go to a company which is signed a share information sharing agreement with us.
Yeah, the reason I was asking, I've done a knowledge up in London, and we used to have inspectors come around and check you. And also, they used to act as passengers. So that is one way of finding out if the taxi drivers are adhering to what they should be doing. So that's why I wonder if you've done spot checks as a passenger as well as checking people's licences and CCTV was working.
Councillor Thomas.
Thank you very much. Let's say how impressed I was by the report and how helpful it was to simply have the changes highlighted in yellow. It did dramatically reduce the amount of reading to have to be done. Can I ask, what was the logic behind saying that the visual side of things would be compulsory, but the audio side of things not, please?
So for reasons I don't fully understand myself, it seems to be that recording audio is more controversial than recording images. Something which I think the Information Commissioner seems to believe that you should have stricter controls on audio recording to recording private conversations and just the visual images. And that's why we've worded the policy in such a way that audio will only be for a limited period of time, only when it's switched on, either by the driver or the passenger. So the exception to that is that, or when you're transporting children, I think that should be a decision made by the East Sussex County Council, who are the safeguarding authority in that regard.
Councillor Field.
Thank you. I find that view slightly odd, because were the problem to be with the taxi driver themselves, and it is their decision whether or not to switch on the audio and therefore the evidence, doesn't that leave us in a very difficult position when complaints are made?
No, the driver or the passenger will have the ability to turn the audio on. So there will be a button available for either the driver to switch it on or the passengers to switch it on.
And how will the passenger know that?
We will have signage in the vehicle to make sure. I think it's something when you're in the London taxi cab, you can see when the audio is on, and the light comes on to tell you the audio is on.
I've never noticed.
Yeah.
Councillor Thomas again.
Just to come back on that answer, it is logical to turn the audio on for children. You would think it was logical to turn it on for a vulnerable adult who might be no more in a position, to make the decision in advance than a child would be. So I share your perplexity about it.
Me too.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, Councillor Cooper first, and then Councillor McGurk.
Yeah, just echoing what Councillor Field said. I literally do not ever remember seeing a sign for audio recording, and if it's down to the taxi driver. And also, historically, if you look, it's actually, if you look at assaults or murders of taxi drivers compared to women or young girls, I think you'll find it's the other way round.
Well, was that two questions? Your hand's up twice, Councillor Cooper.
Sorry.
Just the one. Councillor McGurk.
Thank you, Chair. I previously met with some taxi drivers from Rye and Winchelsea. They had a number of questions, and Richard kindly and very clearly responded to those questions. But one of them, I just think it might be worth clarifying. I've got another question later on, but one of them, which it might just be worth clarifying for the sake of the minutes, was a mistaken belief. So I understand that when video needed to be accessed and used by taxi drivers, they would have had to drive to Lewes for the footage to be accessed and downloaded, or whatever happens to it. Richard, would it just be useful just to clarify, when the footage has, needs to be accessed, what is the process then, please?
Yes, if we do require access to the CCTV recordings, which hopefully will be rare, then we also will arrange for the vehicle to come into the town hall, and then we will arrange for the downloading to take place here. And that'll be useful in terms of making sure the evidence is secured on council premises. So that's what we'll do.
Thank you.
Councillor Biggs
Just
again.
one more question regarding the button for the audio. I take it if you're sitting in the back, there's going to be a button in the back of the car. Once that's pressed, can the driver override that or not?
No, once it's pressed, then it will record for 30 minutes. The idea is really to capture enough of the conversation if the passenger is concerned about the nature of the conversation, then they can then record it. And similarly, if the driver is concerned about what the passenger is saying to them, they can also record it. But it can't be switched off once it's on. It will just then record for a period of 30 minutes.
Sorry.
No, once it's pressed, once you've started recording, it will then record for 30 minutes. You can't
The
turn
point I
it
was
off.
going to make was, if I'm the passenger, I turn it on. The conversation might only last for 10 minutes, but then does it automatically go off when people stop talking, or do I have to press the button to turn it on?
No, once you press it to turn it on, it stays on for 30 minutes. Okay. You can't turn it off.
And Councillor Field.
Now thoroughly confused. It stays on for 30 minutes, but if your journey only lasts 15, is it then recording for the next passenger?
That's a very good question. Presumably, that circumstance could arise, but whether the person then getting into the vehicle, which I think would be quite rare, would then be alerted to the fact that the recording was taking place.
Any other councillor wishing to speak? No, no. In which case, do I have a proposer and seconder for the recommendation that the taxi licensing policy and guidance 2024 be approved?
I propose the recommendation from the officer.
Proposed by Councillor Stanger, seconded by Councillor Delaney. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, councillors. And the next item is item number 5, item number 6, Gambling Act 2005, Statement of Principles. And Richard again, please.
Thank you, Chair. Under the Gambling Act 2005, the Council is required to have a licensing policy which, to distinguish it from the licensing policy we have under the Licensing Act 2005, is called a Statement of Principles. We are required to review this policy, or Statement of Principles, every 3 years, and the current policy expires in 2025, so therefore this new policy will start from 2025. Before we can adopt the statement, we have to carry out some statutory consultation with the Gambling Commission, the police, and with existing premises licence holders. In the past, when we've carried out this consultation, we haven't had any objections or any comments, and I'm not anticipating any comments this time. The policy hasn't changed since we first adopted it in 2007, except with this time we've added the public sector quality duty, and there's some legal explanations within the policy have been expounded. Thank you to Robert for doing that. Then the matter I'd wanted to advise members about was the no casino resolution. Back in 2005, some members may recall that Gordon Brown introduced this legislation, and at the time there was this great understanding that there will be casinos built around the country, regional casinos and local casinos, and everyone was going to bid to have one of these casinos. In reality, that never really happened, or didn't happen at all. But what the local authorities were allowed to do was to pass what was called a no casino resolution. which meant you said that we don't want a casino in our district. We've always had the policy at Rother that we have a no casino resolution. So basically, if we had an application, or in the unlikely event we ever had an application for a casino, we would consider the application on its merits. We wouldn't just say we don't want a casino in Rother. And that's staying the same in this policy. The other thing about this policy is, although we've had it since 2007, we've never actually sort of used it because we are only responsible for licensing premises. The Gambling Commission licensed people and the operators. We just license the premises. So we license the betting shops, places used for bingo, and we also license what's called small-scale lotteries. But we've never, although we have a number of betting shops and a number of places which have bingo, we've never actually had any representations against the premises license. So that means we've never had a licensing hearing into a premises license for gambling, and therefore this policy has never been referred to. But we are required to have this policy, called a statement of principles, and we're required to review it every 3 years, which seems to come up very frequently. And that's my introduction, Chair.
Indeed, it does. The 3 years does seem to go round fast. Does any councillor wish to speak?
This is, I don't know, it's a lot. Haven is in Hastings anyway, but I'm just curious. Something like that, they play bingo, but then they got the slot machines as well. So it says you can't do bingo and can't do gambling. It doesn't apply to Rother, but I'm just interested how that would work.
Yeah, if you have a bingo licence, then that allows you to have gaming machines. So the advantage of having a bingo licence is that does allow you to have higher stake gaming machines. Similarly, with most premises which are used can have a licence for selling alcohol, they can have 2 gaming machines. They just have to notify us they have the 2 gaming machines up to a certain stake. So that's one of the reasons why some premises want the bingo licence, because they can have, actually don't really want to do bingo, but what they want to do is have lots of gaming machines at a high stake. And we used to have, when we had Pontins was open, that had a number of bingo licences and an adult entertainment centre for higher stake gaming machines and a family entertainment centre. I think at one point there were like 3 bingo licences at Pontins. So that was, which was good in terms of being income for the council. Probably not so good for the people staying at Pontins.
Councillor Field.
Thank you. Can I move the recommendation, Chair?
And Councillor Stanners, are you seconding?
Yes. Yeah, second.
And does anyone still wish to speak? No? In which case, the recommendation of the council is that we consult statutory authorities and premises licence holders, and if there are no objections, adopt a statement of principles 2025 to 2028. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously also. Agenda item number 7, hybrid licensing panel meetings. Again, this is Richard.
Thank you, Chair. Members will recall that during the pandemic, we had to hold licensing hearings, or forms of licensing hearings, remotely because we weren't allowed to meet. There's been a recent High Court decision which says that hearings under the Licensing Act 2003, so this doesn't include hearings under taxi licensing, can be held remotely or have hybrid meetings if the council has adopted a written protocol about how to conduct these meetings. Therefore, the proposal is that we approve a protocol which has to go to the audit committee and then on to full council to change the council's constitution. So we can be able to have remote or hybrid meetings if we adopt this protocol, which is set out in Appendix A, And I think that although this won't be used very often, it could be very useful because one of the intricacies of the licensing Act 2003 is that there are strict time limits. So once we have received an application and we've received objections within the 28-day period, then we have to have the hearing within 6 weeks. But there's no discretion about that. We have to have a hearing within 6 weeks. The difficulty arises is that if one or more parties or ourselves want to adjourn that hearing, we actually have to meet in order to adjourn. So by having this protocol, one big advantage will be that we'll be able to meet remotely or hybridly in order to adjourn. And I think the other reason that I would support members approving this protocol is that there may be issues with regard to some people making representations who are unable, for whatever reason, to actually attend hearing in person. And there, in terms of equalities, I think we should have the ability to allow those people to speak remotely and not attend in person, because there may be some legitimate reason why they can't attend. And therefore, the proposal is that we adopt this protocol. It has to go to Audit Committee and then on to full council. That's my introduction, Chair.
Thank you. Just one quick point from myself. The protocol seems to cover both entirely remote meetings and hybrid meetings. Is that right?
Yes, it does. You can have, the idea is that you could have an entire remote meeting. The only requirement is that the actual chair is in the room. Just in order there's someone there, in order to, because obviously in terms of technology, officers have to be here and the chair would have to be there as well, just to make sure that the meeting was conducted properly.
Councillor Field first and then Councillor Hacking.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sure it won't surprise you to know that I would support anything which stops us having to drive in to the town hall. I think it's a good thing to do. I think it's a very good way forward. But also I would say, I don't know how many people here participated in remote meetings, but I certainly was part of at least one, and thinking back maybe even two remote panel hearings during the pandemic, and they worked incredibly successfully. And in fact, I think in many ways they're probably shorter than face-to-face meetings, because although people didn't omit things, they're far more succinct on screen, it seems to me, than they are in person. So I think the protocol covers all bases. I think it's absolutely excellent, and I would really support this.
Thank you. Yeah, I would completely, quite loud. I would agree, and actually I think fully remote is easier than hybrid, where you'd be sat by yourself in the room. But from another point of view, do you remember the one that we did where they got very expensive barristers down from London, and actually that means people can get the legal representation they want without having to pay huge travel, so it's a very good thing.
I think there's just one thing I'd say myself. During COVID, when we had fully remote meetings, I had the misfortune, if you like, to chair a panel when we had to deprive a taxi driver of his licence remotely, and I didn't feel much pleasure in doing that. It just seemed wrong not to be in the same room with a person when you're doing that sort of thing. But does any other councillor wish to speak? In which case, do we have a proposer or seconder? Proposed by Councillor Stang and seconded by Councillor Hacking. Yes. And all those in favour? Councillor Thomas, you can't vote. You're ex officio. But it is unanimous. And that, of course, I should have said that it be approved. What we voted on is that it be approved and the Audit Committee be requested to recommend to Council that the protocol be approved and adopted and form part of the Council's constitution. It has to go that way because of the change to the constitution. Well, and that, I think, concludes the business of the meeting. And at 7 o'clock precisely, I close this meeting. Thank you, councillors. Thank you, everybody.